My husband humiliated me on our wedding day right there at the altar, under a sky so blue it looked staged. I was standing in my white dress, hands trembling around a bouquet of ivory roses, when Ethan leaned into the microphone and laughed. She should be grateful I even married her. The words echoed across the vineyard. Glasses stopped clinking. The string quartet faltered. I heard someone whisper, "Did he just say that?" My mother froze in the front row. My father's jaw tightened. Cameras kept recording. Ethan squeezed my fingers like it was all part of the show. "Relax," he muttered. "Don't make this awkward." He expected me to smile, to be the easy bride, the grateful one. Instead, I looked out at the sea of stunned faces, felt something inside me finally snap into place, and reached for the microphone. What I said next ended the wedding, and what I did after that changed my life forever. My name is Chloe Bennett, and until that moment at the altar, I thought I was living the kind of love story people post about with filtered sunsets and soft piano music. The venue was a vineyard estate just outside Napa Valley rolling hills. White roses lining the aisle, long wooden tables set beneath strings of golden lights. It was everything I had imagined since I was a little girl flipping through bridal magazines on my bedroom floor. Ethan loved to say he didn't care about weddings. "This is more your thing," he'd told me when we first got engaged, slipping the diamond ring onto my finger at a rooftop restaurant in San Francisco. "Just don't go crazy with it." I laughed and promised I wouldn't. But as the months passed, I realized don't go crazy meant something else. It meant don't outshine him. Don't make him uncomfortable. Don't have opinions that challenge his. The first time I noticed it clearly was at an engagement dinner with his colleagues. I had been excited, talking about a new marketing project I'd led at work. Ethan interrupted me mid-sentence, smiling. "Chloe's passionate," he said lightly. "Sometimes she forgets she's not in charge of the room." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Later that night, in the car, I told him it bothered me. He sighed like I was exhausting. "It was a joke. You're too sensitive. You should be grateful I include you in these things at all." Grateful. The word followed me. When he criticized my dress choice. When he corrected the way I told stories. When he decided which friends were good influences and which ones didn't understand our level. It was subtle. Always subtle. If I pushed back, he'd soften his voice and say, "Chloe, I'm trying to make you better. I see potential in you." Potential. Like I was unfinished. Like I needed his approval to be complete. But then there were the other moments. The quiet ones. When he'd pull me into his chest at night and whisper, "You're lucky I chose you, you know that?" And somehow, I mistook that for romance. The morning of the wedding, my maid of honor, Madison, stood behind me while the stylist pinned my veil into place. "You're glowing," she said, studying me in the mirror. I forced a smile. I barely slept. Cold feet? Just nerves. Madison didn't look convinced. She had known me since college. She knew the difference between nerves and doubt. My phone buzzed on the vanity. A message from Ethan. I opened it. "Don't embarrass me today." 4 words. I stared at them until they blurred. Madison stepped closer. "What did he say?" "Nothing," I replied quickly, locking my phone. "Just wedding stress." But the words pressed against my ribs like a warning. "Don't embarrass me." As if I was the liability. As if my existence required management. My father knocked gently on the bridal suite door 30 minutes later. When he stepped inside and saw me in the dress, his eyes filled instantly. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, voice thick. For a second, I almost told him everything. About the comments. About the shrinking. About how sometimes loving Ethan felt like auditioning for a role I was constantly about to lose. Instead, I hugged him and said, "I'm ready," because walking down that aisle felt easier than admitting I might be making a mistake. I didn't know that within an hour, Ethan would give me the clarity I'd been too afraid to claim, and he would do it in front of everyone. The music started at exactly 5 o'clock. The string quartet shifted into Pachelbel's canon, soft and steady, the kind of melody that makes people sit straighter and dab at their eyes. The vineyard glowed in late afternoon light, golden and cinematic. If someone had frozen that moment, it would have looked perfect. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. My father squeezed my arm. "You sure?" he whispered, just before the doors opened. I smiled automatically. "Yes." The aisle felt longer than it had during rehearsal. Faces blurred together, friends from college, Ethan's law partners in sharp suits, distant relatives holding up phones. My mother was already crying. Madison gave me a tight nod of encouragement, and there he was. Ethan stood at the altar, polished and confident in a tailored charcoal suit. He looked composed, relaxed, almost amused. When I reached him, he leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "Try not to trip," he murmured. I forced a small laugh, because cameras were everywhere. The officiant began. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of—" Ethan suddenly chuckled. The sound cut through the ceremony like static. "Sorry," he said, lifting his hand toward the microphone clipped to his lapel. "I just can't believe this is actually happening." A few guests laughed politely. I felt a flicker of relief. Okay, he's just nervous. He turned to the crowd, still holding my hands. "You all know Chloe has been planning this since she was 12, he said with a grin. "She loves the spotlight." More laughter, lighter this time. My cheeks burned, but I told myself it was harmless. Then his grip tightened slightly. "And honestly," he continued, raising his voice just enough, "she should be grateful I even married her." Silence. Not the playful pause of a punchline. Real silence. I heard a glass clink somewhere in the back. The string quartet faltered mid-note. A bird lifted from a nearby tree, startled. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. But then I saw Madison's expression. Horror. My father's jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jump. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan laughed again, louder now, trying to push the moment back into control. "Relax everyone, it's a joke." He leaned closer to me and whispered through his teeth. "Smile." The word wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The smirk. The expectation. The absolute certainty that I would absorb the insult to keep the day intact. In that split second, something inside me shifted. I wasn't embarrassed. I was awake. I realized this wasn't about nerves. It wasn't about humor. It was about ownership. About establishing, publicly, that I was beneath him. A wife who should feel lucky. A woman who owed him gratitude for choosing her. And if he was comfortable saying that in front of 100 guests, what would the next decade look like? The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. "Shall we continue?" Ethan squeezed my hands again. "Don't overreact," he whispered. Overreact. The word echoed in my mind. Because suddenly, I could see every future argument. Every time I'd be told I was dramatic. Every time my feelings would be minimized into inconvenience. I glanced out at the crowd. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching. Watching me. Waiting to see what I would do. Ethan tilted his head slightly, the smile still plastered on his face. "Go on," he murmured. "Say your vows." I felt the microphone in his hand. I didn't think. I just reached for it. His fingers tightened reflexively. "Chloe," he warned quietly, but I had already taken it. My hand stopped shaking the moment I held it. I looked at the guests, the people who had flown across states, bought gifts, dressed up to witness what was supposed to be love. "Hi," I said softly. The word carried across the vineyard like a crack in glass. A nervous chuckle rippled through the chairs. I didn't smile. "I think," I continued, steady now, "that when someone tells you who they are, especially in front of everyone you care about, you should believe them." Ethan's expression changed, just slightly. The first flicker of uncertainty. I turned to the officiant. "I'm not comfortable continuing this ceremony," I said clearly. "I'm withdrawing my consent." Gasps. Actual gasps. "Chloe," Ethan hissed. "Don't do this." I handed the microphone back to the stunned officiant. Then I looked at Ethan one last time. "You don't get to humiliate me and call it love," I said quietly, but loud enough for the first few rows to hear. And I stepped back. Out of his reach. Out of the ceremony. Out of the future he had assumed I would accept. I gathered my dress, turned toward the aisle, and began to walk. At first, no one moved. Then chairs scraped. People stood. A path opened. I heard Ethan's voice behind me. "Chloe, this is insane." But it sounded far away, like background noise. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked all the way down the aisle I had just entered as a bride. And by the time I reached the end, I wasn't a bride anymore. I was free. And I had no idea what that freedom was going to cost. The bridal suite door closed behind me with a soft click that felt louder than Ethan's voice ever could. For a second, I just stood there. The room was still decorated for celebration. Champagne glasses on a tray, makeup brushes scattered across the vanity, my extra pair of heels neatly lined against the wall. It looked like the set of a romantic movie that had been abruptly canceled. Then my reflection caught my eye. White dress, perfect hair, pale face. I didn't look hysterical. I looked clear. Madison rushed in moments later and locked the door behind her. "Are you okay?" she asked, breathless. I nodded automatically, then shook my head. "I don't know," I whispered. Outside, the faint hum of voices had shifted from festive to chaotic. The quartet had stopped playing. Doors were opening and closing. I could almost feel the confusion spreading through the vineyard like smoke. My phone started vibrating on the vanity. "Ethan." "Decline." "Ethan." "Decline." Then my mother. I stared at her name on the screen before answering. "What did you just do?" she demanded, not even greeting me. I closed my eyes. "He humiliated me." "It was a joke," she snapped. "You don't walk out of a wedding over a joke." "It wasn't funny," I said quietly. There was a pause on the line. Then her voice lowered, tight and sharp. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Did that hurt you?" But how does this reflect on us? "I'm not going back out there," I said. "Chloe," she warned. "Don't be dramatic." The word hit harder than Ethan's comment. Dramatic. Like I was a performance instead of a person. Madison reached over and gently took the phone from my hand, pressing the red button before my mother could continue. "You don't need that right now," she said firmly. Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. Not polite. Insistent. "Chloe," Ethan called from the hallway. "Open the door." Madison stiffened. "No." "Chloe," he repeated, voice lowering, controlled. "You're making a scene." I walked toward the door despite Madison's protest and spoke through it. "You already did that." He exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting." "I'm not. It was a joke." "It wasn't." Silence. Then his tone changed. Cooler. Harder. "You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues," he said. "Do you know what that does to my reputation?" My hand trembled against the door. "So that's what you're worried about?" I asked. "Of course I'm worried about it," he snapped. "This wedding cost 6 figures. My firm partners are here. My parents flew in, and you walk out like some rebellious teenager?" "Rebellious. Because I refused humiliation." Madison stepped beside me. "Ethan, you need to leave." He laughed softly. "This isn't your business." "It is when she's asking for space," Madison replied. I spoke through the door again, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not marrying you." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then, very quietly, Ethan said, "You'll regret this." The sentence wasn't loud, it wasn't shouted, but it carried weight. A promise. Or maybe a warning. My stomach tightened. "Is that a threat?" Madison asked sharply. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. The silence that followed felt heavier than the chaos before. Madison locked the door again and turned to me. "Chloe," she said carefully, "has he ever talked to you like that before?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated. He'd never yelled in public. He'd never broken anything. He'd never done anything that would make a dramatic headline. But he'd corrected me, belittled me, told me I was lucky, told me I was too emotional, told me I should be grateful. Grateful he chose me. Grateful he stayed. Grateful he tolerated me. "Yes," I said finally. "He has." Madison's jaw tightened. "That's not love," she said. I looked down at my wedding ring, the diamond catching the light like it was still part of a fairy tale. Slowly, I slid it off. It left a pale mark on my finger. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father. I answered immediately. "Chloe," he said, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "Are you safe?" "Yes." There was noise behind him, raised voices. Maybe Ethan's father arguing with someone. "Do you want me to come to you?" my dad asked. The question surprised me. He wasn't telling me to fix it. He wasn't telling me to go back. He was asking what I needed. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm on my way." When the call ended, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time that day, I didn't feel alone. Outside the window, guests were starting to leave. Cars pulled out of the gravel lot in slow, confused lines. The wedding was dissolving in real time. Madison exhaled and sat beside me on the couch. "Okay," she said gently. "Next step." I blinked. "Next step?" She nodded. "You walked away. That's step one. Now we protect you." The word protect echoed in my mind, because suddenly, I wasn't thinking about embarrassment anymore. I was thinking about patterns, about control disguised as charm, about that sentence, "You'll regret this." My phone vibrated again. A text from Ethan. "You made me look like a monster. Fix this. Now." I stared at the screen. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I didn't feel small. I felt done. My father arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't knock gently. He didn't hesitate. He opened the bridal suite door and stepped inside like a man who had finally decided which side he was on. When he saw my face, he didn't ask about the guests. He didn't mention the money. He just said, "Are you coming home with me?" "Yes," I answered immediately. Madison squeezed my shoulder. "Good." Outside, the vineyard looked different. The fairy lights were still glowing, but the energy had shifted from celebration to cleanup. Staff members moved quietly, avoiding eye contact. A few guests lingered in small clusters, whispering. I kept my head up. Not because I felt strong, because I refused to look ashamed. As we walked toward my father's car, Ethan appeared near the entrance, jacket slung over his shoulder, jaw tight. "Chloe," he called. I stopped but didn't move closer. He walked toward us slowly, calculating each step. My father positioned himself slightly in front of me without making it obvious. Ethan's voice was calm, too calm. "You need to talk to me," he said. "I don't," I replied. His eyes flicked to my dad. "This is between us. It stopped being between you two when you used a microphone," my father said evenly. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Chloe is emotional right now. She doesn't understand what she's doing." "I understand exactly what I'm doing," I said. He stepped closer. "You're destroying our future over one sentence." "It wasn't one sentence," I replied. "It was a pattern." His expression hardened. "You're rewriting history." "No," I said. "I'm remembering it." There it was again, that subtle shift in his tone. "You'll regret humiliating me," he said quietly. "You don't want to make an enemy out of me." The words hung in the air. My father's posture changed instantly. "Is that a threat?" he asked sharply. Ethan forced a laugh. "Of course not. I'm just saying actions have consequences." I felt the old instinct rise up, smooth it over, calm him down, apologize for the tension. Instead, I said nothing. Silence can be powerful when you don't use it to shrink. My father opened the car door for me. Ethan looked at me one last time. "You'll come back," he said. "You always do." And that was the moment I realized something important. He didn't think I was capable of leaving. He thought this was a tantrum, a scene, a temporary rebellion. He didn't know I was done. We didn't go to my parents' house. We went to Madison's apartment in San Francisco. By the time we arrived, my phone had over 40 missed calls and dozens of messages. From Ethan, from his parents, from my mother. I sat on Madison's couch in my wedding dress and opened the texts one by one. "Ethan, I was joking. You embarrassed me. Call me right now. This is insane. Don't make this worse." His mother. "Chloe, you need to be reasonable." My mother. "We need to fix this before people start talking." I looked at Madison. "People are already talking." She nodded. "Which means you stop worrying about optics and start thinking about protection." "Protection?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Because when a man says, 'You'll regret this,' that's not romantic drama. That's escalation." The word sat heavily between us. Escalation. Madison grabbed her laptop. "First," she said, "we save everything." She showed me how to screenshot every message and email them to myself with timestamps, how to back them up to cloud storage, how to create a document titled, "Wedding Day Timeline." "Write down exactly what happened," she instructed. "Every word, while it's fresh." I hesitated. "Isn't that extreme?" She looked at me carefully. "Chloe, documentation isn't extreme, it's smart." So I wrote, 5:12 p.m., Ethan makes public comment. She should be grateful I even married her. 5:14 p.m. whispered, "Don't ruin this." 5:15 p.m. Withdraw consent to ceremony. 5:18 p.m. Ethan states, "You'll regret this." Seeing it typed out stripped it of confusion. It wasn't romantic chaos. It was control. Then my father came into the living room holding his phone. "I spoke to someone," he said. "Who?" I asked. "A family law attorney, Rebecca Shaw. She's good, discreet." My stomach tightened. I don't want this to turn into a war. My father sat across from me. "It already is." The honesty startled me. "You don't have to marry someone just because invitations were sent," he continued. "And you don't have to tolerate intimidation just because you once loved him." Madison added softly, "You stopped it before it became legal." That matters. Legal. The word felt like oxygen. No marriage license filed. No shared assets yet. No formal binding contract. I hadn't destroyed my life. I had interrupted it. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Ethan. I didn't play it. Instead, I forwarded it to the new folder Madison had created. Evidence, not emotion. That was the shift. I wasn't arguing with him anymore. I was preparing. Later that night, after showering off layers of makeup and hairspray and expectation, I sat alone on Madison's balcony. San Francisco's skyline shimmered in the distance. For the first time all day, there was quiet. And in that quiet, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because it was easy. Not because it wasn't terrifying. But because I didn't have to spend the rest of my life explaining why I deserved respect. Behind me, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. "If you don't call me, I'll come over." I stared at it. And instead of panic, I felt clarity. I turned to Madison. "If he shows up," I said, "we don't negotiate." She nodded. "We call security, or authorities." Saying the word out loud made it real. I wasn't a bride anymore. I was a woman choosing safety over ceremony. And that choice was only just beginning. By morning, the wedding was no longer a private disaster. It was everywhere. Someone had uploaded a 30-second clip from the ceremony. Ethan's voice clear, smug echoed across social media. "She should be grateful I even married her." Then the silence. Then my voice. "Steady. I'm withdrawing my consent." The video didn't show everything. It didn't show his whispered warning. It didn't show the threat in his eyes. But it showed enough. The comments were brutal. Some supported me. Some mocked me. Some said I was dramatic. Some said I was brave. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel in high definition. My phone lit up again. "Ethan." I let it ring out. Then another message. "This is spiraling. You need to fix this. Call me before you make things worse. Fix this." As if I'd broken something that belonged to him. Madison leaned over the kitchen counter, reading the screen. "He's not apologizing." "No," I said quietly. "He's strategizing." Another text came in. My partners saw the video. "Do you understand what you've done?" There it was again. Reputation. Image. Status. Never once. "Are you okay?" My father walked into the room with 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of me. "He's calling your mother nonstop," he said. "She thinks you should talk to him, privately." Of course she did. Private meant controlled. Private meant no witnesses. Private meant the narrative could be rewritten. I shook my head. "Not without a third party present." My dad nodded slowly, almost proud. "Good." That afternoon, Rebecca Shaw called. Her voice was calm, clipped, efficient, the kind of voice that didn't get distracted by drama. "Chloe," she said, "I've reviewed the timeline you sent. You did the right thing stopping the ceremony. There is no legal marriage. That protects you." The word protected settled deep in my chest. She continued. "However, I'm concerned about the language he's using. You'll regret this. Fix this. I'll come over." That can escalate. My throat tightened. "He wouldn't actually," Rebecca interrupted gently. "We don't assume. We prepare." Madison mouthed. "I like her." Rebecca gave us steps. "Do not meet him alone. Do not respond emotionally. Keep every message. If he shows up uninvited, document and call building security or authorities immediately." Control often increases when it's challenged, Rebecca explained. "The goal is to create boundaries that aren't negotiable. Boundaries that aren't negotiable." I had never set those before. Not with Ethan. Not with my mother. Not with anyone. Then, as if summoned by the conversation, My phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I hesitated, then pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. Chloe, this has gone far enough. You're embarrassing yourself. People think you had some kind of breakdown. You know that's not true. You need to come home and talk this through. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me. Madison's jaw tightened. Rebecca's voice came through the speakerphone. Save that. Do not respond. I forwarded it to the evidence folder. Then my phone vibrated again. This time, a text. If you don't answer, I'll come there. We're not done. The air shifted. My father stood up immediately. He's not coming here. Madison moved toward the door, checking the locks. Rebecca's tone sharpened. Chloe, if he arrives, you do not engage. Call security. If he refuses to leave, call authorities. That's not dramatic. That's protective. Protective. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. For the first time, this didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like extraction, like pulling myself out of something that had been tightening slowly for years. An hour later, the building intercom buzzed. Madison froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. She pressed the speaker button carefully. Yes. There's a man here asking for Chloe, the doorman said. He says he's her fiancé. Was. Not anymore. Madison looked at me. Rebecca's words echoed in my head. Do not negotiate. Do not let him up, Madison said firmly. There was muffled arguing downstairs. Ethan's voice rose controlled but angry. I just need 5 minutes, the doorman replied. Sir, she told us not to let you in. Told. Not asked. Told. The difference mattered. Ethan didn't like losing access. He didn't like being denied. I could picture his expression, the disbelief, the wounded pride, the simmering anger beneath it. My phone buzzed again. You're hiding now? This is pathetic. My hands trembled, but I didn't respond. Another message. I made you who you are. Don't forget that. That line hit differently. Because it revealed the truth. He believed he had built me, improved me, owned the version of me that existed. But standing in Madison's apartment, barefoot, stripped of veil and fantasy, I felt something radical. I felt like myself. The intercom buzzed again. Madison answered cautiously. He's leaving, the doorman said. But he's upset. I exhaled slowly. Rebecca's voice returned through the phone. Good. That's how boundaries work. They frustrate people who rely on control. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. This wasn't a dramatic movie ending. It wasn't applause or cinematic revenge. It was something quieter, safer. Ethan had lost the stage. And without the stage, his performance didn't have power. My phone buzzed one final time that evening. You'll regret choosing pride over me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed 3 words. Not emotional. Not reactive. Just clear. Do not contact me again. I sent it. Then I blocked his number. My heart pounded, but not from fear. From finality. Madison let out a slow breath. You just changed the entire dynamic. I nodded. Because for the first time in our relationship, Ethan didn't have the last word. And more importantly, he didn't have access. The wedding had lasted 15 minutes. The awakening would last the rest of my life. 2 days after the wedding, that wasn't. My father called early in the morning. His voice sounded different, measured, careful. Chloe, he said. I went back to the venue. My stomach tightened. Why? To collect your things, he replied. Your dress, the gifts, paperwork. There was a pause. And? I asked. And I spoke to the wedding coordinator. Something in his tone made my spine straighten. She was uncomfortable, he continued. She said, Ethan gave her special instructions. I sat up on Madison's couch. Instructions? Yes. My father exhaled slowly. He asked her to keep an eye on you, to redirect you if you seemed too emotional, to limit open mic moments. My mouth went dry. Limit open mic moments? He didn't want you speaking unscripted, my dad said quietly. Madison froze mid-sip of coffee. What else? I asked. My father hesitated. He provided a printed sheet, he said. Titled Contingency Plan. The words landed like a weight in my chest. He told the coordinator, my father continued, that if you tried to leave or cause a scene, staff should notify him immediately and stall you until he could intervene. Intervene. I felt like the room tilted. This wasn't a joke, I whispered. No, my father said. It was premeditated. I closed my eyes. The laughter at the altar, the confidence in his voice, the way he squeezed my hand like I belonged to him. It hadn't been a slip. It had been choreography. He wanted to establish dominance publicly. And he had prepared for resistance. Madison sat down beside me slowly. That's not romance, she said. That's control strategy. My father continued. The coordinator felt uncomfortable after what happened. She gave me copies. Copies? I repeated. Yes. I have photos of everything. Send them to Rebecca, Madison said immediately. I already did, my father replied. There was a long silence after that, because now this wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about intent. I thought back to every time Ethan had called me dramatic, every time he'd framed himself as the calm, rational one. He hadn't just wanted a wife. He had wanted control over the narrative. And when I stepped outside of it, he panicked. That afternoon, Rebecca called again. I've reviewed the documents, she said. This is significant. In what way? I asked. It demonstrates premeditated control tactics, she replied evenly. It doesn't constitute a crime by itself. But combined with the threatening language, it strengthens your case for protective boundaries if necessary. I swallowed. Do you think he'll escalate? Rebecca paused. I think he's lost something he assumed was secure, she said. And people who rely on control often respond poorly when they lose it. Madison looked at me carefully. Which is why, Rebecca continued, you need to remain consistent. No emotional responses, no meetings, everything documented. I nodded. Consistency, that was the new rule. Not reacting, not defending, not explaining. Just steady. That evening, my mother showed up at Madison's apartment unannounced. She looked tired, flustered, upset. You're not answering my calls, she said the moment I opened the door. I needed space, I replied calmly. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited. This has gone too far, she said. Ethan is devastated. His parents are humiliated. People are choosing sides. I leaned against the kitchen counter. This isn't about sides, I said. It's about respect. She threw up her hands. He made a bad joke. Men say stupid things under pressure. It wasn't a joke, I said evenly. And it wasn't spontaneous. Her brows furrowed. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the images my father had sent. The printed sheet. Contingency plan. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. He wouldn't, she started. He did, I said quietly. She read the lines. If Chloe becomes emotional, redirect her. If she attempts to leave, notify groom immediately. Limit unscripted speaking opportunities. My mother lowered the phone slowly. That's excessive, she admitted. It's controlling, I corrected. She sank into a chair. For months, I continued, my voice steady. I've been told I'm too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional, but he was planning how to manage me. My mother looked shaken. But marriage requires compromise, she said weakly. Compromise isn't submission, I replied. She was silent for a long time. Then she said something I never expected. I didn't see it. Neither did I wanted to say. Because control rarely arrives screaming. It arrives, smiling. Later that night, Ethan emailed me from a new address. Blocking his number hadn't stopped him. The subject line read, "We need to clear this up." I stared at it before opening it. His tone was different this time. Less aggressive. More polished. Chloe, I understand you were emotional. The pressure got to both of us. I forgive you for walking out. Let's not ruin something beautiful over misunderstandings. You're not thinking clearly right now. Call me when you calm down. I read it twice. Then I noticed what wasn't there. No apology. No accountability. Just reframing. I forgive you. As if I'd wronged him. Madison looked over my shoulder. He's repositioning himself as the reasonable one, she said. Yes, I replied. That's what he always does. Rebecca had warned me. Control adapts. It softens when aggression fails. I forwarded the email to the evidence folder. Then I typed one final message, short and precise. Do not contact me again. Further communication will go through my attorney. I sent it. My heart raced. Not from fear, from certainty. For the first time in my life, I wasn't negotiating my dignity. I was enforcing it. Outside, the city hummed quietly. Inside, something fundamental shifted. The wedding had exposed him, but walking away was exposing me, to myself, and I was beginning to understand something powerful. The most dangerous thing to someone who thrives on control is a woman who no longer seeks their approval. A week later, Rebecca called with something new in her voice. "Chloe," she said, "Ethan's firm has reached out." My stomach tightened. "For what?" "They're concerned about public optics," she replied calmly. "The wedding video is still circulating. Apparently, clients have started asking questions." I almost laughed. So, now it mattered. Not when I was humiliated, not when I was threatened, but when it touched his professional image. "What do they want?" I asked. "They want to clarify the narrative," Rebecca said, "which usually means they want you to sign something. A statement?" I guessed. "A non-disparagement agreement," she confirmed, "and possibly a mutual confidentiality clause." I leaned back in my chair. Translation: silence. "They wanted me quiet," Rebecca continued. "They've requested a meeting, with counsel present." Madison, who was sitting across from me, raised her eyebrows. "Oh, this is good." "Good?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, "because now he can't bully you alone." Rebecca agreed. "You will not attend without me, and you will not speak emotionally. You will speak factually." Factually. The opposite of how Ethan had always framed me. We scheduled the meeting for Friday morning. Neutral conference room, downtown, glass walls, corporate furniture that smelled faintly of polished wood and strategy. When I walked in, Ethan was already there. He stood up immediately. He looked different. Not relaxed. Not amused. Tight. Controlled. There was a bruise to his ego that no suit could hide. His attorney sat beside him, a composed man with silver hair and a cautious expression. Rebecca sat next to me. I felt small for half a second. Then I remembered the altar, and the microphone, and the plan he had printed, and the threat. And suddenly, I didn't feel small at all. Ethan tried to smile. "Chloe." I didn't smile back. Rebecca spoke first. "We're here to discuss your continued attempts at contact and the reputational implications of the wedding incident." Incident. That word almost made me laugh. Ethan leaned forward. "Let's not dramatize this." Rebecca's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Your client made a public statement degrading my client. On video." Silence. Ethan cleared his throat. "It was a joke." Rebecca slid a printed screenshot across the table. "The contingency plan." His attorney's expression changed instantly. Ethan froze. "This appears to contradict your spontaneous joke explanation," Rebecca said evenly. Ethan's jaw tightened. That was taken out of context. Rebecca didn't blink. "The context is printed in bullet points." The room felt suddenly smaller. Ethan looked at me. Not angry. Not soft. Calculating. "You're really doing this?" he asked quietly. I met his eyes. "Yes." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm responding proportionally." Rebecca continued. "Given the documented pattern of control tactics and the threatening language in post-ceremony communication, we are prepared to pursue a protective order if harassment continues." The word protective order landed like a hammer. Ethan stiffened. "That's absurd," he snapped. Rebecca's tone didn't change. "Then you'll have no problem ceasing all contact immediately." His attorney placed a hand on his arm subtly. The first crack. Ethan inhaled sharply. "You're ruining my life," he said, eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, the old reflex almost surfaced. Apologize. Soothe. Fix. Instead, I said something he never expected. "No," I said quietly. "You tried to build a life where I stayed small. I chose not to live in it." The silence was thick. Rebecca slid a document toward Ethan's attorney. "This is our position," she said. "No direct contact. No defamatory statements. No harassment. Any necessary communication will go through counsel." Ethan's attorney scanned the paper. Then he looked at Ethan. "This is reasonable," he murmured. "Reasonable." The word Ethan had used against me for years. "You're not being reasonable." Now it was being used against him. Ethan stood abruptly. "You think you won?" he said to me. I shook my head slowly. This was never about winning. He stared at me for a long moment. And for the first time since I had known him, he didn't look powerful. He looked confused, because control had always worked before, and now it didn't. We left the conference room without shaking hands, without raised voices, without drama, just boundaries. Outside, Rebecca placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You handled that well," she said. I exhaled slowly. I didn't feel strong. "You don't have to feel strong to act strong," she replied. Madison met us on the sidewalk. "Well?" she asked. "It's done," I said. "Not legally forever, but psychologically." The man who had tried to humiliate me publicly now had to navigate me legally, and the dynamic had shifted permanently. That night, I sat alone in Madison's apartment with the city lights glowing beyond the window. My phone was silent. No threats. No apologies disguised as control. No attempts to fix me. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something profound. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was disciplined. And discipline is something controlling people never expect from the person they think they own. 3 months later, I stood in front of a mirror again. Not in a vineyard. Not in a bridal suite. In a small apartment I had rented on my own. The walls were bare. The furniture was mismatched. There were still unopened boxes in the corner labeled kitchen and books. It wasn't glamorous. But it was mine. The silence in that space didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. Ethan had stopped contacting me after the legal meeting. Rebecca had sent a formal notice, and his attorney had confirmed compliance. No more surprise appearances. No more new email addresses. No more reframing me as unstable. The video had faded from trending to background noise, and something unexpected had happened. People started reaching out not with gossip, but with gratitude. Women I barely knew sent messages. "I wish I had done what you did." I ignored the red flags too. "Thank you for not laughing it off." At first, I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't meant to be symbolic. I had meant to survive. One evening, Madison came over with takeout and sat cross-legged on my living room floor. "You know," she said, handing me a container of noodles, "you changed the ending of your own story." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel like an ending." "It's not," she said. "It's a pivot." She studied me carefully. "Do you miss him?" The question was honest. I considered it. "I miss who I hoped he was," I admitted. Not who he actually was. That distinction mattered. Because grief doesn't always mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes it just means you're mourning an illusion. A week later, my father came by with a small box. Inside it was the wedding dress. Cleaned, preserved, untouched. "I wasn't sure what you wanted to do with it," he said. I ran my fingers over the fabric. For a moment, I saw myself walking down that aisle, hopeful, unsure, smaller than I realized. "I don't need it," I said gently. "What will you do with it?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "Donate it," I said. "Let someone else use the fabric for something stronger." He nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you," he added quietly. The words surprised me. Because they weren't about appearances. They were about courage. Later that night, I opened my laptop and reread the final message Ethan had sent before the legal notice shut everything down. "You'll regret leaving. Nobody will love you like I did." I used to think that was a threat. Now I understood it was a confession. Nobody would love me the way he did. Because his version of love required control. It required me shrinking. It required gratitude for being chosen. And I no longer confused possession with devotion. I closed the laptop and stepped onto the balcony. The city hummed softly below. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval to feel secure. I wasn't calculating how to keep peace. I wasn't rehearsing apologies for things that weren't my fault. I was just standing, breathing, existing at full size. And that was enough. What I learned. If there is one thing I want anyone listening to take from my story, it's this. Humiliation disguised as humor is not harmless. Control disguised as protection is not love. And silence in the face of disrespect is not maturity. When someone publicly diminishes you, they are testing how much you will tolerate. When someone tells you to be grateful for basic respect, they are lowering the bar intentionally. Walking away is not dramatic. It is disciplined. It is protective. It is legal when necessary. It is powerful. I did not win a fight. I did not destroy a man. I simply withdrew my consent from a marriage, from a pattern, from a future built on shrinking. And sometimes, that is the bravest thing you can do. On my wedding day, my husband tried to make me feel small in front of everyone. Instead, he revealed himself, and I chose to walk away, forever.